If you're driving and suddenly your car runs out of fuel, you're probably putting your car away and looking for a way to get fuel so you can start your car again. But when a high-altitude pilot realizes he's running out of fuel, he probably won't have much choice. This is exactly what the crew of Air Canada Flight 143 experienced on July 23, 1983. The day before the accident, the plane had a flight from Toronto to Edmonton. On July 23rd, the plane flew from Edmonton to Montreal, where the new crew arrived, including pilot Captain Robert Person and co-pilot Maurice Quantel. The important things to know is that the Air Canada industry at the time was changing the units of measurement from the British machine, which consisted of a set of units measuring inches and miles and pounds and blah blah, to the metric one. Air Canada also had metric only on its new Boeing 767 until then, and Air Canada Flight 143 was one of the same new Boeing 767s. All Air Canada aircraft except the Boeing 767s used British measurement units, which caused confusion for the refueling team. The refueling team was ordered to give 22,300 kilograms of fuel to Air Canada Flight 143, but they mistakenly refueled only 22,300 pounds of gasoline. That is, only 10,100 kilograms and even less than half of the fuel tank of the plane. Without realizing the mistake, the flight crew confirmed the amount of refueling and the plane took off from the airport and headed towards its destination. It looked like a disaster was coming. After several hours of flying and between ways, flight attendants realized their grave error when they observed a warning of running out of gasoline, but it was too late. Meanwhile, the lack of gasoline disabled the left engine. Captain Person should have decided as soon as possible what to do. He decided to make an emergency landing at Winnipeg Airport. But before they could get to Winnipeg, the right engine also failed. With both engines failing, the plane's power was also cut, meaning all the cockpit computer instruments were also knocked out. It was then that the pilot and co-pilot decided to safely land the plane's 61 passengers and flight attendants without fuel or electricity and with only the mechanical tools at their disposal. They knew they didn't have much time. The first things they did was start reading the book. Of course, not romance book or psychology book. They took out an airplane emergency book to see how to land Boeing 767 with two failed engines. But they soon realized that inside these notebooks there was no explanation about it. Another problem was that Air Canada had no idea that this would happen to one of its planes, and they never asked pilots to make an emergency landing with two silent engines at an altitude of 12,500 meters. The only chance the passengers and crew had was that Captain Person had a lot of experience flying gliders or no engines. He had to make the biggest decision of his life, and he didn't have much of a chance. He soon decided to slowly lower this giant Boeing without any engine like a kite so that maybe it could land on a road or a vast plain. Because of the lack of electricity, they had no idea of their vertical speed. That is, the Variometer Grade, which shows pilots the rate of increase and decrease in altitude, didn't work, and without this rating, the captain couldn't figure out how long he had time to fly without an engine. The pilot knew that if he didn't hurry, they would reach a stage where the plane would free fall straight down. Captain Person surmised that as long as they could travel downward at 400 kilometers per hour, they would stay afloat in the air. But if the speed of the plane fell below 400 kilometers per hour, the plane would stop moving and free fall would begin at an angle of 90 degrees downwards. Meanwhile, they concluded they couldn't get to Winnipeg Airport. Quantel's co-pilot offered to land at an Air Force-owned airfield in the town of Gimli, the same airport where Quantel finished his military service as a young man. Captain Pearson and the airport tower of Oregon agreed with the decision, but no one knew that the airport had been decommissioned and turned into a car racing track, and, incidentally, at the same time a race was being held on a part of the runway. They were approaching the runway, which had now become a drag strip. Aided by gravity and with no electricity, the captain released the wheels and quickly dived to the side of the runway, or the same racetrack. He had no choice but to land on the piste. This landing was too hard for a couple of reasons. The first reason was that because the plane's engines were off, there was no sound coming from the plane, and because of that, the people on the ground had no news of a giant plane arriving. The second reason was that the front wheel of the plane was not locked at this emplacement. And the third reason was that the inflatable grasshoppers had come out for an emergency landing, and as long as the locusts were spinning, the pilot could control the plane. However, as the speed of the aircraft decreased, the speed of rotation of the propellers decreased, making it more difficult to control and steer the aircraft. But at this moment, two miraculous things happened. The first miracle was that the front wheels of the aircraft were not locked in place, and when Captain Pearson was sitting on the ground, he braked violently, causing the front wheel to retract and roll back into the fuselage, causing the tip of the plane to hit the ground. A landing of the aircraft without the front wheel and the extreme fraction of the fuselage with the ground made the plane stop faster. This incident caused the plane to land directly and not veer off the runway and not collide with people on the side of the runway. The second miracle was that Captain Pearson applied more right brakes, and this he did caused the left wheels to hit the guardrails in the middle of the piste and the plane to stop faster. And finally, Air Canada Flight 143 landed safely on the ground 17 minutes after running out of fuel and losing its engines. Fortunately, none of the passengers and crew of the plane and the people present on the runway were seriously hurt. It's unbelievable to see how heavy a penalty the pilot and co-pilot were given for the mistakes in verifying fuel levels, but it's true. And the punishment for the pilot who saved about 70 lives is this heavy. But before you see the pilot punished, I urge you not to forget to like and comment for this video and support us with subscribe to the Dark Fact channel. Following an internal investigation, Air Canada gave Captain Pearson a 6 months demotion, and the co-pilot was sentenced to 2 weeks of compulsory and unpaid leave. But they objected to these decisions, and Air Canada eventually reversed its decision. Even Federson International Aviation gave them an award for this emergency landing. After that, both pilots continued to pilot with a promotion, and nothing happened to them again. Another interesting thing to know is that Boeing 767s were in service in Air Canada's fleet until 2008, meaning they retired this Boeing after 25 years. Many experts say Captain Pearson is undoubtedly one of the best pilots in the world, and if it wasn't for his experience, he would likely have had very better memories of the incident. Thank you for being with us until the end. We are so happy to have viewers like you.